Hello, my name is Randy Harrington, and it's one day after New Year's Eve or New Year's. This is New Year's Day, so I hope everybody had an enjoyable New Year's celebration and hope everyone is safe. Uh, Tonight's story is going to be about a gentleman named David Holly, and right now he's in his mid 70s, maybe even a little older. But at the time that I met David, he was in his early 60s. So this is going to be his story that happened in 1971. In 1971, David Holly traveled deep into the Comanche Mountains at the north end of Broken Bow Lake. His life after that will forever be tied to that event. Now, I was invited. I don't know when I met David, but somehow I was invited to research with them. They had something going on in February of 2010 or 11, and it was a yearly event for them. Sometimes it was twice a year, but in this particular event, I was invited, to come down there and join them at Holly Creek campgrounds on the northern end of Broken Bow Lake. This is his story. The story involves uh, several people. It was David Holly and his friend Buddy. Well, his buddy was his friend AC, whose first name was Andy. So the event that we're going to be talking about involves David and his buddy. The secondary players in this story are David Holly's father, Hugh, his name Bud, and his brother-in-law, Sonny Walston, and his cousin, Earl Varley. So you might want to keep this in mind because as the story is unfolding, the gentlemen's names will be talked about. When I got there, it was in the middle of the night, or at least it was late, maybe around midnight, and it wasn't easy to find. You turn off of 259 there by an old gas station, and it's still there. Every time I go down there, I drive by it, and of course I think about this area because that's where you have to turn to get back into Holly Creek, and it's a good 5 or 10 mile stretch through very woody areas. The night that I got there, I mean, GPS was just for me, it was like my first GPS, so it wasn't real accurate, but uh, it was a it was a muddy mess getting back in there at that time. Now here's a closer view. Uh, it's where the mountain fork, goes into the lake, and the circle there to the left shows the Holly campground, Holly Creek campsites. And now this is what it looks like now. Uh, what it looked like then when I was there, maybe a little less traveled, and then certainly from 1971 when David Holly had his encounter was certainly even more rugged and desolate then. But here's the area over here to the right. You see that circle on the right? That's what they called Rebel Island. And you'll understand in the story why they call it Rebel Island. And it's not really an island, but from the campgrounds over there on the left, when you look out there, it looks like an island, but it's really a peninsula. So the peninsula goes back there to the east and opens up into this vast wilderness area on the east side of Broken Bow Lake. So, so indeed, if there's something out there, it's not alone on an island. It had just come out on that peninsula. possibly because it's a good observation point to look into that campground area. All right, and here's some pictures of when I first showed up there, and you can see me in animated conversations with David Holly, and there's one in the bottom there where I'm sitting down listening to his story. So I mean, it's a good area. It all starts with noises behind the tents. Now, this is my version of hearing the story and me just kind of recapping the story. But, in 1971, David and his buddy, AC, wanted to celebrate their upcoming graduation. And they were from Clarksville, yeah, Clarksville High uh, in Texas. So, small town in Texas. You got some high school boys wanting to go out and celebrate, their impending graduation. I think one of them was going off into the military, and one of them was going off into to college. So, it was just a celebration. And the other players that were involved was, of course, was Hugh Holly, which was David's father. They called him Bud. So Bud and Earl Varley was David's cousin, and they were going to do some fishing, camping and fishing. Just your general, 1971 canvas tinted, you know, excursion, campfires, drinking a few beers and doing some fishing. So there was another player involved who was the brother-in-law named Sonny Varley, or no, Sonny Walston. So when they get there, they've got the tents set up, and David said that they wanted the tents way back into the wood line because that felt more like camping, like rugged nighttime camping or woodsy camping rather than having it out in the open, down there by the water. So they had their tents set up in the wood lines. Sorry, I got to keep myself caffeinated and awake after all the fireworks uh, from last night in our neighborhood. I spent most of the night comforting our dogs. Kept me up. Anyways, but at least I got to bring in the new year that way. So Sonny was in the tent trying to get to sleep. Bud Holly and Earl were fishing. So they had a boat with a motor and they were out fishing, doing some nighttime fishing. So David Holly and his friend AC was kind of, there manning a campfire down there by the water. And up in the tents, Sonny had already turned in because he was tired. So uh, that was the dynamics of what the people were doing. So David and AC were hearing noises up in the woods, in and around the tents, back in the wood line there. Breaking and popping of brush, some heavy breathing, some growls, and then they were making comments about it, like, man, like, is that a dog? Is there a dog back there? And I think at one point David walked over to the vehicle, uh, and even said something aggressively to whatever clearly followed him in the wood line to the vehicle. And David may have said, hey, I think he had a bow and arrow. And he was like, Al, I'll shoot you and I'll shoot an arrow into you, because at that point he's thinking it's bipedal, something's walking back there, and it was following him to the vehicle, but yet staying in the wood line. And 1971, they may have had one flashlight amongst all of them, and that flashlight was probably with the guys in the boat. So, so they didn't have a whole lot of the tech that we have now. We got headlamps on our heads and really good flashlights, LED flashlights. 1971, we're talking about some small town, uh, you know, country boys that didn't, they didn't have a whole lot of equipment. A couple of canvas tents and a campfire. maybe I think they had a couple of lanterns. Yes, they did have a couple of lanterns. So that makes it very limited in what you're going to be able to see in the darkness of the woods, especially when you're a couple 17-year-old boys, uh, not real experienced, country boy experienced, but not Bigfoot researcher experienced. So you start getting a little nervous about what's going on out there, and you kind of hug that campfire. Well, we hug the campfire now when we get a little nervous. So you can imagine these boys, they were actually thinking maybe Sonny was messing with them. And one of them went up there and poked their head in the tent and saw that Sonny was crashed out. Uh, so it wasn't Sonny who was in the tent that was messing with them, but there's something back there walking around, making noises, grunting and groaning and growling and breaking branches and things like that. You guys know it's the typical Bigfoot behavior, but this is in 1971. The area there is much rougher then than it is now. A lot more campsites now, a lot more travels of people coming in and out of there. Back then, not so much. I think the lake was only a couple years old. They dammed it up and it was filling up. Maybe it was still being filled up at that point, but it was very young lake set up there. So, anyways, what they learned the next day is for a while before Sonny got to sleep, he was thinking the boys were messing with him in the noises that he was hearing out behind the tents. So indeed, Sonny heard a lot of that stuff going on too, and was thinking the boys were messing with him. So, but clearly Sonny went to sleep. He was exhausted. The other two gentlemen were out fishing, doing some nighttime fishing, and David and his friend AC Andy was left there to fend for themselves. And so as the night wore on, I think even Andy, his friend Andy, a couple beers, couple beer, he was getting a couple beer brave, and would yell at whatever they thought was back there. Come on out here. I'll kick your ass. They were even thinking it might be some local hillbillies, or country hillbillies or something. I mean, I can only imagine how their imaginations would run amok, especially once you've determined that what you're hearing is on 2 feet rather than a dog or something on 4 feet. And so I can only imagine. Yes, get a couple beers in you, young men egging each other on is going to yell at whatever's back there. Show yourself. Whatever. So you can imagine that that's the theatrics of what's going on there. Well, then Hugh, Bud Holly, and Earl show back up from their late night fishing excursion, and the boys help get the boat pulled up there on the shore, and the dad, of course they're tired, and they're about to go to bed, so they're heading back to go to bed and tell the boys to turn out the lanterns, and call it a night. And David, he was saying that he had to turn one of the lanterns off, and then the next lantern, when you turn it off, it's dark, and he had to still walk to the tent after turning that lantern off. So when he kind of hustled it to the tent to get in the tent, and so he and AC are in the tent, and after hearing all of the stuff that they had heard the night before or that night, they decided to pull the two cots together so that they would share space, or at least be in close comfort of each other, covered up with the blanket and all that stuff. And well, he asked AC if he wanted to be there next to the window. And AC was like, no. So David had to take the spot next to the window, So I can only imagine what was going through their mind, because they had already built themselves up to be fearful of whatever was happening because it was unknown. So that's kind of comical. Two, 17-year-olds, barely have any experiences in life at all, had this what they thought was something scary, and then now they're in this dark tent that they probably ran. They probably ran to get in the tent for protection, in the darkness, and now somebody's got to lay next to that window, and so it's just kind of funny. But uneventful for the rest of that night. And the next day they get up and they go about their camping stuff. And I don't think David and them even mentioned, because they didn't have any understanding. They just probably assumed that maybe they misinterpreted some animal back there. So, they do their regular camping, maybe another night or so, but on the last night or the last day, David and his friend AC, across the bay there, you could see what they thought was an island. And here's the picture of that from their point of view. So that's the peninsula. That's the very tip end of that peninsula that I drew on the map. And you may have to go back to that map to refer to it. But to them, it kind of looked like an island. So they were like, man, let's take the boat. Let's go over there to the island. And they had a rebel flag. It was like their school flag was a rebel flag or something to that effect. These are deep Texas folk in the 1970s. Rebel flag had, it was a proud heritage thing for them. So here's these young boys saying, well, let's take the boat across over there and let's go up and plant this flag. You know, we're gonna do this. So here's the view of what they do from the campground area over there to the left. They cross that bay, and in his story, he says they put the boat on a beach, or at least a landing spot. So now this is what the picture looks like now on Google Earth. So I just put an arrow to spots that could pass as being a landing spot for a beach. Maybe it was further up the other sides of this, but at least on those are two locations that could be the possible landing points for that boat. And he said there was a clear game trail, a very wide game trail going up, that they were able to follow fairly easily. So let's just imagine, if I got this correct, that they just went up the hill, up this mountain. To them it was a small mountain, but they're young men. They could easily get up there, and so they get up there to the top of this flat area, and there was an area about the size of, I don't remember how big he said it was, but it was quite a large area that was all trampled down and flattened down on this flat spot up at the top, almost like something had permanently established itself there. Who knows? And he said there was broken off branches and twists, at 6 and 7 feet, things like that. Well, they planted that flag in one of those breaks, in one of the breaks of one of those branches. They planted that flag, and then they did their school yell. So imagine they went through all of this to get up there in that spot, and this is the new frontier, and we're planting our school flag. So they did their school yell. Now their school yell, and they probably screamed it out with all their might because they're tough and they're young and the whole world is ahead of them, and so they scream out, "We raise hell, we have fun, we are the class of '71," while this rebel flag has just been planted. So imagine from a Bigfoot's point of view, who would come in from the east side of that lake across the top of that peninsula, can easily see down into those campsites to see what's going on. And these boys are coming up the hill, so he retreats. And they kind of get into his area, plant a flag, which probably had some red on it. I've understood that red may have an antagonizing color to a Bigfoot when somebody wears a red shirt or something like that. So imagine a flag with some red on it and them screaming their song before leaving. So could that have agitated a Bigfoot that might have been up there on the top of that hill? It seems so. It seems like that may be what happened, because as these guys start to head down the hill, they start hearing something pacing them, following them, staying off in the brush and walking along and staying with them. So they start getting spooked. They start going a little faster. whatever it is keeping pace with them, following them out. You guys know the routine. You've heard this 100 times. They're being paced out. But apparently, whatever was doing this was a more aggressive. He was already in a bad mood, maybe because of what they did at the top of this hill. So they actually went off trail and went down in the other direction away from the sound that this thing was following them. It spooked them so bad. So they kind of got off trail and went down another way, and whatever it was started following them down that way. And they were really getting a little frantic. And as they were going downhill, he said they came to like a ledge that he had to jump down. And they didn't have, it was right behind them, so they didn't have time to consider many options. They went ahead and jumped and landed down below this, which was maybe, I don't know, a 10-foot drop. So they jumped and was down below this thing, and they're sitting down there, and it's like they caught themselves at that moment how ridiculous what they were doing, and they were just, for some, they must have felt a little safe. They just jumped this thing, and they're down there, and they're just like, okay, man, that was getting a little crazy. And David said he looked up, and this thing looked over the edge at him, and he said it was a big gorilla looking scary thing. So you think they were panicked before with just hearing noises? This involves seeing one, and the panic was over the top at this point. So they are flying down the rest of what's left of this hill to get down to the shore of this what island peninsula. And when they get down and they hit the water area, they see that the boat is down over that way. So they're running to the boat, and well, eventually this thing comes out of the tree line or brush line or whatever, and they're already scrambling, getting in the boat, pushing it out, trying to get the motor started. And this thing come out, and I mean, went into the water. The boat is way out there, and they got it started, and this thing comes out into the water waist deep and is slapping the water, it's cuffing the water at them, and they tear out, in the boat back towards camp. Uh, so all I can think of is I've been doing this for so long, and I've heard so many stories. I'm trying to think that clearly what they did at the top was the instigator, probably, to irritating this creature, because most of them don't get that aggressive for just no reason. They don't, they do pace people out and stuff like that, just maybe to make sure you are leaving, but to pace you in such an aggressive manner means that it was probably irritated, not irritated that that they showed up to his domicile up there on the top of that hill, but what they did in the screaming and the planting of the flag and all that stuff. I can only imagine that it interpreted that as two little bitty males coming up into my area, gonna threaten me. So that's how I interpret what happened there. But it's a fascinating account. Uh, I like it. I believe him. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to put a link at the end of this video where you can actually listen to David telling the story himself at a campfire. So you get his version of him telling the story. I'm just giving you a recap of how I remember him telling the story. So I'm sure I don't have all of the details absolutely 100% correct, but you'll be able to hear it from his own mouth. If I can't get the link put on my video, I will put it at under the description of the video where you can just click it yourself and listen to it. I recommend that you do. But I also want to tell you that David is getting older. He's no longer probably going to be able to research. And here's a few pictures of me and him, or him. There I am up there talking to his son, and there I am down there freezing my butt off. The weather was cold. Yeah, it was February. It was rainy, so there was a couple of nights where it was very unpleasant. And there's Dave. He's in his 60s in this picture, and now he's in his mid 70s. So he's really to the point now where he's probably not going to be capable of getting out in the field. I think his eyesight is almost gone. Diabetes has taken its toll on him. He may have had a mild stroke, so things don't look good. Uh, I'd like to put this video out to honor just the efforts that he's put into it. I mean, 50 years. He kept going to that same location for 50 years and taking people with him, trying to elicit more behavior, do research, and try to find evidence and stuff like that. And isn't that all of our stories? Any of us who have survived an encounter, we keep chasing it. It's crazy. So this may be most of our future. We just keep going till we can't go anymore. But he's at that point now where it's in the final stretch. So there's another gentleman involved with his research. This is the Timberline Bigfoot Group out of Texas. Uh, and the gentleman's name is Quartz Griner. He's a photographer, a videographer, and he's a Timberline Bigfoot researcher. Most of the pictures that I've got are from him. He's taken videos. He did a video of me talking about my thermal camera one night, and you can go see that on his page. But find him on YouTube and and subscribe because he and I are friends, and we're actually going to get back out to this location on Holly Creek with my drone and fly across to that Rebel Island, and maybe we can locate that Rebel flag. Apparently, it might still be there. Wouldn't that be cool to see that flag still perched up in a tree somewhere? So Quartz is going to be carrying on the torch of the Timberline Bigfoot group. Uh, he's younger than me. You can see he's got a little gray in his beard, but he's still younger than me, so he's got plenty of time, and he's got the skills. He's learned a lot from David Hawley and them, and he's certainly got the camera equipment and the skills of as a photographer and a videographer to document things. So keep your eye out for them, and I'm going to join Quartz at some point, hopefully this year sometime, and we will get back out there and do a report on what's going on out there still. And here he is, Quartz Griner Photography. So you might check that out, and that's his YouTube channel too, Quartz Griner Photography YouTube. So I want to end this on a picture with David as he is now. This was, I think, maybe his last outing. The long last look at an area that changed your life, and the final chapter for the aging researcher. Thank you, David Hawley, for your story. So that makes me sad. I see my future the same way, where I'm just going to keep doing this till I can't do it anymore. Uh, but David has been very unselfish in giving and giving and inviting people. He went to the Kiamichis. He's joined us at my base camp there in the Kiamichis a few times. So we've shared a campfire many times in my location in northeast Oklahoma, on Lee Creek. So he's not just somebody that I briefly met. It's somebody that I've shared stories with around a campfire and ate some meals with. So uh, try to stay tuned to the Timberline Bigfoot group and follow Quartz Griner as he continues carrying the torch for David. Uh, and maybe you can reach out to David, tell him you appreciate anything that he's done. So, all right, until next time, thank you so much.